The Horizon Chaser wasn't known for its comfort. Hell, it wasn't known for much at all beyond the minimal. A rust bucket. If the universe had an armpit, Helios was the sweat stain. Not that I was complaining got you demoted, and I was already hovering a hair's breadth above cosmic garbage collector. "Captain, you might want to take a look at this," mumbled Sarge, my second in command and the human equivalent of a hangover. His voice was like gravel in a blender, but he was reliable. Not like that toaster on legs the fleet called an AI. I leaned over the console, squinting at the screen through a haze of recycled air that smelled faintly of regret and yesterday's rations. "Holy crap, Sarge, is that a superlaser?" "Looks like it," he replied, deadpan. "If it isn't, then someone's got one hell of a flashlight." We were staring at what used to be a solar farm, now retrofitted into something that could make the Death Star look like a nightlight. The power of 1,000 angry suns, harnessed for what? A backwater colony's coup de grace. "I assume we're not supposed to have this?" I asked, already knowing the answer. We were Earth's forgotten children, after all, banned from faster-than-light travel by the all-powerful alien coalition, the conclave of pious and probably annoying vegetables. "Nope," Sarge said, scratching a 5 o'clock shadow that was perpetually stuck on 8 o'clock. "But it's shiny and ready to make a statement." "Great. Just what we need, an intergalactic incident in the making." Behind us, the rest of the crew was busy making the ship look busy. That's all we did these days, look busy. Real work was a thing of the past. The aliens saw to that by grounding us like naughty teenagers caught with our hands in the interstellar cookie jar. "Captain," Sarge grunted, pulling up another screen, "we've intercepted a message. Please let it be a distress call. I love those." The message wasn't a distress call. It was a rallying cry, a garbled transmission from Earth. "Colony inhabitants, Earth needs you." "FTL ban be damned, it's time to take back the stars." "Someone's feeling nostalgic," I muttered. "And suicidal." "Think it's legit?" Sarge asked. "Who cares?" I said, smirking. "Let's pretend it is. It's not like we have anything better to do, unless you've finally figured out how to turn water into whiskey." Sarge chuckled, a rare sound that could scare small children and animals. "Not yet, but I'm working on it." The idea of rallying felt as foreign to me as proper hygiene to a space pirate. Earth had abandoned us, and now they wanted us to fight their battles. Still, the thought of sticking it to the conclave had a certain appeal. "All right, Sarge," I said, turning to face him. "Prep the crew. We might as well see how deep this rabbit hole goes." "With pleasure, Captain." Nothing like a bit of mayhem to wake up the senses. As Sarge lumbered off to spread the good word, I couldn't help but feel a twitch of excitement. Maybe it was the thought of FTL travel, the forbidden fruit of spacefaring. Or perhaps it was the thrill of taking the fight to the bastards who'd kept us in the cosmic kiddie pool. The rest of the crew gathered on the deck, a ragtag bunch of misfits who'd somehow survived on grit and sheer bloody-mindedness. "Listen up, you lot," I barked, my voice slicing through the chatter like a knife through processed cheese. "We've got a message from Earth. They want us to give the conclave a good kicking." "About time," grumbled Lenny, our resident engineer, who was more machine than man these days. "I'm sick of fixing leaks with spit and prayers." "So what's the plan, Captain?" piped up Jenny, the mechanic with a penchant for explosives and a disregard for personal safety. "We're going to see if this message is legit, then we'll decide if we're in or out. If nothing else, it'll be a good excuse to fire up that superlaser and barbecue some alien lettuce." The crew cheered. Well, most of them. A couple just nodded and went back to whatever it was they were pretending to do. "Sarge, get us some coordinates," I ordered. "Let's see where this rabbit hole leads." The ship shuddered as we engaged the thrusters, a symphony of coughs and wheezes that would make a deathbed seem lively. I settled into my chair, watching the stars blur into lines as we broke free of Helios' gravitational grip. "We'll need allies," Sarge said, ever the voice of unwanted reason. "This isn't a one-ship job." "Allies? Sure, let's just call up the local space mafia. I'm sure they've got nothing better to do," I replied, rolling my eyes so hard it was a wonder they didn't pop out. We'll cross that bridge when we vaporize it. The universe slipped past us, silent and vast, a constant reminder of just how small we were in this grand cosmic joke. Still, there was something exhilarating about defying the ban, even if it was a one-way ticket to a fiery oblivion. "Captain," Sarge called out, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. "We've got a ping." "That was quick," I said, leaning forward with an interest I usually reserved for finding a bottle of booze I'd hidden from myself. "It's coming from an abandoned mining colony," Sarge explained, grimacing at the holographic display as if it had personally insulted him. "Looks like we're not the only ones picking up the message. Great. A party. And we weren't even invited." "What's the plan, Captain?" asked Jenny, her eyes alight with the kind of manic glee that meant either glory or disaster. "The plan," I said, grinning like a fool walking into a trap, "is to crash it." We approached the mining colony, a derelict cluster of metal and rock that looked like it had seen better centuries. The docking bay doors were ajar, a gaping maw that could either mean welcome or enter at your own risk. "Sarge, keep the engines hot," I ordered, "just in case we need to make a swift exit." "Aye, Captain, but if we get into a scrap, I can't promise a graceful retreat." "Graceful is overrated," I said with a shrug. "I'll take not dead over graceful any day." We docked with all the subtlety of a brick through a window, the ship groaning in protest as it settled into place. The crew gathered at the airlock, weapons at the ready and nerves stretched tighter than a drum. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dimly lit corridor that smelled of rust and old promises. We moved cautiously, the sound of our footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silence. "Captain," Sarge whispered, pointing to a flickering sign. "Looks like the party's just down the hall." "All right, folks," I said, squaring my shoulders. "Let's crash this shindig and see what kind of trouble we can stir up." We found them in the control room, a motley assortment of humans and aliens, all gathered around a flickering hologram of Earth. "Looks like we're fashionably late," I said, stepping forward with a confidence I didn't feel. The room fell silent, eyes turning to us with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. An alien with too many tentacles and not enough sense stepped towards us. "Who are you?" it demanded, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "Just your friendly neighborhood troublemakers," I replied, flashing a grin that had been known to unnerve the bravest of souls. "We got your message," Sarge added, his tone as dry as a desert, "and we're interested." The alien regarded us for a moment, its eyes narrowing to slits. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Why not both?" Jenny quipped, her fingers twitching eagerly at her sidearm. "We're here to see if this message is more than just hot air," I said, crossing my arms. "Earth wants a fight. We're listening." The alien nodded slowly, its skepticism giving way to something akin to respect, or maybe indigestion. It's hard to tell with aliens. "Then welcome," it said, gesturing to the hologram. "We have much to discuss." And so there we were, caught in the crossfire of a brewing rebellion, armed with nothing but wit, sarcasm, and a superlacer that might just make an alien salad if we played our cards right. As the discussions began, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were diving headfirst into a pit of vipers. But hell, if I was going to go down, I might as well do it with style. "Sarge," I whispered as the alien droned on about strategy and alliances. "Remind me to update my will." "Already done, Captain," he replied, a rare hint of humor in his voice. "But don't worry, if we're lucky we won't need it." Gathering a team of outcasts was a lot like herding cats if those cats were heavily armed, deeply suspicious, and prone to bite. Still, there was a certain charm to it, assuming you liked your charm with a side of ulcer. I elbowed my way through the crowded control room, which somehow smelled like burning circuits and cold coffee. Bringing a tech genius and a former diplomat into this mix was akin to tossing vinegar and baking soda into a volcano. Explosive, sure, but also compellingly unpredictable. Zephyr Torin, our tech virtuoso, was hunched over a console, hands moving with the kind of speed that only came from too much caffeine and not enough daylight. Zephyr had the social graces of a rabid raccoon, but the brain that came with it was worth its weight in gold. "Zephyr," I called, hoping not to startle him into frying the circuits. "You still hacking, or have you finally found that backdoor into the Conclave's banking system?" He snorted, not bothering to look up. "If I had, do you think I'd still be here slumming it with you lot?" "Point taken," I said, turning to Halcyon Dre, our former diplomat turned reluctant rebel. Halcyon had all the charm and charisma you'd expect from someone who could convince a death row inmate to smile for the camera. The fact he could do it without breaking a sweat was both impressive and mildly terrifying. "Dre," I said, leaning against the console, "you think you can sweet-talk an alien coalition into letting us break the FTL ban?" Halcyon smiled, a thin, sharp thing that was more knife than expression. "Captain, if I could sweet-talk my way out of Earth's bureaucracy, I'm sure I can handle a few grumpy vegetables." "Good, because I hear they're particularly leafy this time of year." Sarge, ever the practical sort, cleared his throat. "Captain, we've got a bit of a problem." "Of course we do," I sighed. "I'd be worried if we didn't." Sarge tapped the screen, pulling up a map dotted with red blips. "Those are surveillance drones. The Conclave's been watching us closer than a paranoid parent with a teenager. And I'm guessing they're not just looking for good TV shows," I grumbled. "Nope. Those drones are designed to enforce the FTL ban," Sarge explained. "They catch you breaking the rules and you get a one-way trip to oblivion." "Charming," I said. "So what's the plan?" "I assume you're not suggesting we host a bake sale to buy our freedom." Zephyr, still glued to his screen, piped up. "We use that shiny new toy of yours, the Superlacer?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "We're talking about using a weapon designed to make stars look weak against a bunch of drones." Zephyr finally turned to face me, his face a mix of excitement and madness. "Why not? It's not like we have a lot of options. Because we might as well hang a sign on our backs saying, 'Come and get us before we screw up the universe.'" Halcyon leaned back, looking thoughtful. "It's a risk, but it's a calculated one. The drones are the eyes and ears of the Conclave. Blind them and we might have a shot." "A shot at what?" "Making things even more complicated," I countered. Sarge, ever the realist, grunted. "Captain, we're already neck-deep in cosmic manure. A little more won't make a difference." "And what if the Conclave retaliates?" Jenny chimed in, her voice unusually serious for once. "We're talking about poking a space bear with a very pointy stick." "Then we'll have to be ready to poke harder," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The room fell silent, everyone lost in their own thoughts, weighing the risks against the rewards. It was a gamble, sure, but one that promised either glory or a spectacularly stupid demise. "All right," I said, clapping my hands together to break the tension. "Let's say we go through with this. What's the plan?" Zephyr cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing in the silence. "We'll need to get close enough to the drones without getting spotted. Once we're in range, we let loose with the Superlacer." "And what happens if we miss?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jenny shrugged, a glint of excitement in her eyes. "We go down in a blaze of glory or stupidity. Take your pick." "Glad to see you're optimistic," I said dryly. Halcyon, ever the diplomat, sighed. "We can't afford to miss. If we do, the Conclave will know exactly what we're up to." "Then we better not miss," Sarge said, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. "This is insane," I muttered, rubbing my temples in frustration. "And yet I can't think of a better option." "Insanity's just another word for adventure," Zephyr quipped, his fingers already dancing over the console as he began calculations. "All right, people," I said, raising my voice to draw the scattered attention back. "Let's prep the ship. We're going to need every bit of luck, skill, and sheer dumb courage we can muster." The crew dispersed, each member heading off to prepare for what might be our last stand. As they left, I caught Halcyon's eye. "You think this is going to work?" I asked. His smile was cryptic but hopeful. "Captain, if it doesn't, at least we'll have a hell of a story." "That's what I'm afraid of," I muttered, watching him disappear into the corridors. With the crew prepped and nerves stretched tighter than a drum, we made our way to the docking bay. The plan was simple: get close, aim true, and pray the cosmic dice roll in our favor. As we approached the swarm of drones, I couldn't help but feel like a mouse sneaking into a trap, hoping the cheese wasn't poisoned. "Zephyr," I called over the comms. "How close do we need to get?" "Close enough to be uncomfortable," came the reply, laced with wry amusement. "Comfortable is for the dead," I muttered, steering the ship with a level of caution usually reserved for defusing bombs. Sarge kept an eye on the radar, watching the blips grow larger as we closed the distance. "We're right in the thick of it, Captain." "All right, let's do this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Zephyr lighted up. The hum of the superlaser charging filled the ship, a sound that promised both salvation and destruction. There was a certain majesty to it, the kind that made you feel small in the face of its power. "Here goes nothing," Zephyr muttered, pressing the final button. The superlaser fired, a blazing beam of light tearing through the void. It was a spectacle beautiful and terrifying, an exclamation mark in the dark expanse of space. "Did we hit anything?" I asked, breathless with anticipation. Silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the ship's systems and the muted tension of the crew. Then finally, Zephyr's voice crackled through the comms. "Direct hit," he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "The drones are toast." "We did it," Jenny whispered, disbelief and awe mingling in her tone. "We actually did it," Sarge confirmed, his voice carrying a rare note of pride. Relief washed over me, a wave that left me both exhilarated and exhausted. We'd taken a gamble, and against all odds it had paid off. "All right, folks," I said, allowing myself a moment of triumph. "Let's get the hell out of here before the conclave decides to crash our party." As we turned the ship away from the smoking ruins of the drones, I couldn't help but steal a glance at the stars. They seemed a little closer now, a little brighter, as if acknowledging our defiance with a silent nod. But the victory was bittersweet, a fleeting moment in a galaxy that was as unforgiving as it was vast. We'd won a battle, sure, but the war was just beginning. "Captain," Sarge said, his voice bringing me back to the present, "I've picked up another transmission." "Another rallying cry?" I asked, already weary of the answer. "Not quite," he said, his expression unreadable. "It's from the conclave." Of course it was. Because nothing ever came easy in this universe, and I should have known that a single victory wouldn't go unanswered. "Put it through," I ordered, bracing myself for whatever fresh hell awaited us. The voice that crackled through the speakers was calm, authoritative, and dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for things you scrape off the bottom of your shoe. "Humans of Helios," it began, "this is a warning. Cease your activities immediately or face the consequences." "Charming," I muttered, rolling my eyes. "They could at least say please." "You have been warned," the voice continued, the threat hanging heavy in the air like a guillotine's blade. "Any further defiance will be met with force." The transmission cut off, leaving a silence that was both deafening and oppressive. "Well," Halcyon said, his voice light and mocking, "looks like we've got their attention." "Perfect," I grumbled. "Just what we needed, more eyes on us." "What now, Captain?" Zephyr asked, leaning back in his chair with deceptive nonchalance. "We stick to the plan," I said, though the words felt hollow. "We find more allies, we gather our strength, and we keep fighting." "And if they come for us?" Jenny asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. "Then we make them work for it," I replied with a grim smile. "We may be outgunned, but we're not out of the fight." The crew nodded, determination hardening their expressions. We were in this deep, and there was no turning back now. The universe might be a cruel and capricious place, but we'd carved out our corner, and I'd be damned if we let anyone take it from us. "All right," I said, settling back into my chair, the weight of command heavy but familiar. "Let's see where this rabbit hole leads next." And with that we set course for the unknown, a ragtag band of rebels with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The stars were waiting, and so were we. The control room smelled like burnt coffee and failed dreams, a perfect backdrop for our current situation. "Did anyone order a cosmic shitstorm?" I asked, eyeing the blinking console like it owed me money. For a second, I imagined a universe where problems solved themselves. Then I remembered reality was a lot less generous. Sarge snorted, shaking his head. Looks like it came with a side of existential dread. Just what I wanted, I muttered, turning to Zephyr, who seemed to be in a staring contest with his screen. Zephyr, tell me you've got some good news. He didn't bother to look up, fingers dancing across the console with the grace of a drunk octopus. Well, Captain, if you call spotted by the drones good news, then yes. We're practically the prom queen of interstellar surveillance, I groaned. Fantastic. Let's hope they don't ask for a dance. Halcyon, ever the diplomat-turned-rebel, leaned against the console with an easy grace that made the rest of us look like we were trying too hard. They've definitely noticed our little light show. Right, I said, rubbing my temples. Because pissing off the conclave is exactly how I wanted to spend my Tuesday. Sarge glanced at the map, the red blips multiplying like bad decisions. We tripped their sensors. They're swarming like flies on a compost heap. Great, I said, feeling the weight of the universe and a bad hangover settling on my shoulders. Zephyr, we need options. Now. Zephyr's fingers blurred over the keys. Already on it, Captain. Turns out these drones have a vulnerability. Really? Jenny asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. And what, pray tell, is that? A fear of commitment. Zephyr grinned, his eyes glinting with the kind of mischief that usually preceded a disaster. Close. They're networked through a central node. If we hit that, it's lights out. And what are the odds of succeeding without getting ourselves vaporized? I asked, not holding my breath for an optimistic answer. About the same as winning the lottery while being struck by lightning, Zephyr said, shrugging. So, not great. Perfect, I said, sarcastically upbeat. Let's get this suicide mission on the road. Halcyon clapped me on the back, his voice carrying a dry amusement. You sure know how to rally the troops, Captain. It's a gift, I deadpanned before turning back to Sarge. Thoughts? Sarge scratched his chin, not one to rush headlong without considering the implications. We need to decide fast. The conclave's not known for their patience or mercy. Mercy. From the conclave, I laughed, a short, bitter sound. That's like expecting a hug from a cactus. Jenny was pacing, her boots echoing ominously against the metal floor. So, we're just supposed to waltz in and unplug their network. Sounds like a blast. And if it goes south? Halcyon asked, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. We improvise, I said, hoping the words sounded more confident than I felt. We've got the superlaser and we know how to use it. Zephyr's attention snapped back to the console, his face tightening with concentration. All right, folks, I've got a location for the node. It'll take precise flying to get there without triggering every alarm in the sector. Don't worry, I said, gripping the controls. I've got a steady hand and a complete disregard for personal safety. Halcyon raised an eyebrow, a half-smile playing on his lips. You sure you're not a closet adrenaline junkie? I snorted. I just like proving everyone wrong. With the plan set and the odds stacked against us, we prepared for the next step. The ship hummed with tension, each creak and groan of the metal a reminder of just how fragile we really were out here. As we closed in on the node's location, the atmosphere in the control room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarge kept his eyes glued to the radar, his expression a mixture of determination and resignation. Keep it steady, he said, voice low and urgent. We're threading a needle here. I can see that, I replied through gritted teeth, guiding the ship with the finesse of a surgeon wielding a scalpel made of duct tape and wishful thinking. Zephyr was muttering to himself, tapping furiously on his console. Almost there, just a bit more. And got it. What's the status? I asked, trying not to let the tension snap my concentration. Nodes within range, Zephyr announced, triumph in his voice. Time to see if my hacking skills are up to the challenge. Well, if they are anything like your social skills, we're doomed, Jenny quipped, earning a rare chuckle from Sarge. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Zephyr shot back, not missing a beat. Now let's see if I can make these drones dance to our tune. The minutes dragged, each second a lifetime as Zephyr worked his magic. The rest of us waited, caught between apprehension and anticipation. "Any second now," Zephyr muttered, fingers flying over the console. And a sudden silence fell over the ship, the tension replaced by a palpable sense of disbelief. "Did it work?" Halcyon asked, leaning forward as if trying to see the answer through sheer willpower. Zephyr's grin was broad and smug, the kind that usually preceded a gloating session. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just pulled the plug on their network." "Really?" I said, disbelief warring with a creeping sense of triumph. "We actually did it." "Yes, Captain," Zephyr confirmed, his voice positively gleeful. "The drones are blind as bats in a blizzard." A cheer erupted from the crew, the release of tension almost physical in its intensity. We'd done it. We'd scored a win against the Conclave, and it felt damn good. "All right, folks," I said, trying to keep the giddiness from my voice. "Let's not get too comfortable. We still need to get out of here before they notice their flies are blind." As we plotted our escape, I couldn't help but steal a glance at the stars, feeling for the briefest moment like we might just have a chance in this cosmic game. But then, as if the universe had overheard our celebration and decided to rain on our parade, the ship's comms crackled to life. "Captain Thalia Kirsch," a voice in tone dripping with condescension, "you have made a grievous error." "Ah, crap," I muttered, recognizing the voice of the Conclave's envoy. "What do you want? You think you can defy us and go unpunished?" The voice continued, ignoring my question. "Your actions have not gone unnoticed." "Yeah, we kind of guessed that when you sent your nosy drones," I shot back, my irritation growing. The envoy's voice was smooth, almost amused. "You will meet your end soon enough, Captain. We will see to that." I cut the transmission with a decisive jab, not in the mood for further threats. "Well, that's just wonderful. We've got a bounty on our heads now." "Join the club," Zephyr said with a shrug. "Exclusive membership perks include sleepless nights and a shortened lifespan." "But hey, at least we still have each other," Jenny chimed in, flashing a grin. "Misery loves company, right?" Halcyon chuckled, shaking his head. "And what a miserable bunch we are." Despite the dire situation, a laugh escaped me, the absurdity of it all too much to ignore. We were rebels without a cause, a crew of misfits taking on the universe with nothing but a superlaser and sheer stubbornness. "All right," I said, taking a deep breath and forcing myself to focus. "Let's get the hell out of here before they send reinforcements." As we plotted a course for safety, my thoughts drifted back to the Conclave's warning. They were serious, and I knew we were living on borrowed time. But for now, we'd won a victory, however small, and in this unforgiving galaxy, that was something worth celebrating. "Captain," Sarge said, breaking into my thoughts. "What's next?" I looked at my crew, their faces a mix of anticipation and defiance. We'd come far, and despite the odds, I knew we'd keep pushing forward. "We find allies, gather our strength, and keep fighting," I replied, my voice steady. "The Conclave won't know what hit them." And with that, we set our sights on the stars, ready to face whatever came next. Because in the end, we were human, and that meant never backing down. The control room still smelled like that burnt coffee. Or maybe it was just my nerves giving off the scent of charred defeat. Either way, nobody was in the mood to deal with the Conclave's kindergarten-level threats. We had bigger fish to fry, or maybe just one big, ugly fish, the drone relay station. And wouldn't you know it, our dear friend Zephyr had a plan, or at least an idea that was as half-baked as his usual schemes. "All right, Captain," Zephyr said, taking a break from his usual banter with the console. "I've cracked into some intel about the drone relay station." "Let me guess," I said. "It's lightly guarded, completely unarmed, and they've rolled out the welcome mat," he smirked. "Close. It's actually got more layers of security than a paranoid billionaire's mansion, but there's a silver lining." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for the catch. "Go on." "Turns out they've got an alien sympathizer on the inside," Zephyr continued, his voice laced with the kind of excitement that usually meant trouble. "Someone who doesn't quite see eye to eye with the Conclave's whole anti-human ethos." Sarge let out a low whistle. "Great, Now we're going to trust our fate to someone who's probably one loose screw away from a breakdown. Sounds like our kind of ally, I said dryly. But beggars can't be choosers, especially when we're about to pull off a stunt this stupid. Halcyon cracked a grin, his diplomat's facade slipping slightly. Besides, what's the point of living if you can't gamble with your life now and then? Jenny, ever the skeptic, folded her arms. Yeah, because that's worked out so well for us so far. At least it keeps things interesting, I shot back. All right, Zephyr, how do we make contact with this alien sympathizer? Already on it, Zephyr replied, fingers dancing across the console. I've set up a secure line. Just waiting for. Before he could finish, the comm panel lit up with a series of blips and whistles I'd learned to interpret as the alien equivalent of a ringtone. The screen flickered to life, revealing an alien face that looked like someone had merged a squid with a neon sign. I tried not to stare at the hypnotic, swirling colors of its skin. "Hello, humans," it said, the translator rendering its voice into something akin to a drunken choir. "You are the ones attempting to dismantle the drones, yes." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "That's us. Heard you might have some helpful intel." The alien made a noise that could have been a laugh or a burp. Hard to tell with these guys. Indeed, the relay station is vulnerable to a short power surge. You could use it to cascade a system failure. Sounds perfect, I replied, suppressing the urge to question why the Conclave couldn't design a more robust system. "What's in it for you, though?" The alien undulated slightly, which I guessed was their version of a shrug. "Let's just say some of us find the Conclave's methods distasteful." Zephyr leaned over, whispering just loud enough to be overheard. Translation: they pissed off the wrong squid. "Okay, Glowy," I said, addressing our new friend, "how do we cause this power surge?" "You will need to overload their main power conduit," it said, tentacles gesturing wildly. "I will send you the schematics." "Thanks, much appreciated," I replied. "And if we get caught," it made that burping laugh again, eyes glinting. "Then you will have even more enemies." "But that is the risk of rebellion, is it not?" "Fair point, I supposed." I nodded, closing the connection. "All right, team, let's prep for a joyride into the lion's den." Halcyon rolled his eyes but smiled, the kind that said he was in even if it was against his better judgment. And here I thought we'd have a boring afternoon. With the plan set, we gathered our wits and what little gear we had left. It wasn't much. A few explosives, a prayer, and the kind of blind courage only desperation could muster. We suited up, the familiar weight of the gear both a comfort and a reminder of the stakes. As we made our way to the ship's hangar, Sarge slapped me on the back. "You ever wonder why we keep doing this, Captain?" I snorted, glancing at him. "Because we're too stubborn to quit and too stupid to change." The ship's engines hummed to life, and as I took my place at the helm, I couldn't help but grin. "All right, kids, let's show those drones what a real party looks like." The journey to the relay station was filled with that tense silence only broken by the rhythmic beeping of controls and the occasional sarcastic remark from Zephyr. We all knew the drill. No need for unnecessary chatter, just focus and the occasional dark joke to keep the nerves in check. As we approached the station, the reality of our plan began to sink in. It loomed ahead like a colossal fortress, bristling with weapons and God knows what else. No turning back now. The odds were somewhere between grim and laughable, but then again, that was our sweet spot. "Keep it tight, everyone," I said, voice steady. "We're about to knock on the devil's door." Zephyr's hands danced over the console, initiating the sequence to mask our approach. "In position, just say the word." "Not yet," I replied, eyes fixed on the display. "Wait for it." We drifted closer, the station's massive bulk filling the viewport. If there was ever a time to regret one's life choices, this was it. But regrets were for people with time to kill, and we were fresh out of both. "Now," I barked, and Zephyr activated the cloaking signal. We sped toward the station, slipping through its defenses like a bad metaphor. The inside of the station was a labyrinth of corridors and blindingly bright lights. Everything about it screamed conclave efficiency, which was to say it was plain, cold, and devoid of any personality. We moved quickly, guided by the schematics our neon friend had provided. "How much further?" Jenny asked, her voice low but with that edge of impatience I knew all too well. "Not far," Zephyr replied, his tone surprisingly focused. "Just around the corner." The power conduit was as unimpressive as it was vital, a tangle of wires and control panels humming with energy. Zephyr set to work and the rest of us formed a loose perimeter, keeping our fingers crossed that the alien's intel was good. "How's it looking?" I asked. "Like a bowl of spaghetti," Zephyr muttered, "but I think I've got it." Of course, that's when things started to go sideways. An alarm blared, the kind that made you want to crawl into a hole and reconsider your life choices. "Incoming patrols," Sarge shouted, already moving to cover. "Zephyr, hurry it up," I snapped, drawing my weapon. "I'm working as fast as I can," he shot back, fingers flying over the controls. The first conclave guards burst into view and chaos descended. We exchanged fire, the corridor filled with the acrid smell of burning circuits and the sharp crack of energy weapons. "Cover me," Zephyr shouted, jabbing the final sequence into the console. A moment later the conduit sparked and shuddered, a cascade of power surges racing through the station's systems. It was beautiful in a destructive, we're all going to die kind of way. "Time to bail, people," I yelled, and we made a mad dash for the exit. The station convulsed around us, lights flickering as systems failed. We sprinted through the chaos, the conclave guards hot on our heels. The hangar bay was in sight when Jenny stumbled, a stray shot catching her in the shoulder. I cursed and doubled back, hauling her up and dragging her along. "Leave me," she gasped through gritted teeth. "Not a chance," I growled, firing over her shoulder at the pursuing guards. We reached the ship, breathless and battered but alive. Halcyon hit the launch sequence and we blasted free from the dying station, the explosion a bittersweet crescendo behind us. Once clear, I slumped into my seat, heart pounding. "Everyone okay?" "Peachy," Jenny groaned, clutching her wounded arm. Sarge let out a low chuckle. "Just another day at the office." Zephyr, pale but grinning, nodded. Well, that was a blast. I couldn't help but laugh, the adrenaline still coursing through me. "Let's not make a habit of it." Halcyon set a course for the nearest safe haven, and we left the station's wreckage behind. We'd pulled off the impossible, and somehow we were all still here to tell the tale, for now at least. "Captain," Sarge said, catching my eye. "What's next?" I glanced around at my crew, these misfits who'd somehow become family. We'd faced death and defied the odds, and yet the fight was far from over. "Rest up," I replied, the weight of what lay ahead settling on my shoulders. "Because when we make our next move, we'll need every bit of strength we've got." As the stars streaked by, I allowed myself a brief moment to savor the victory. We were still alive, and in this universe that was something worth celebrating. But the Conclave wouldn't sit idle for long. We'd bought ourselves some time, but the next move was sure to test us even further. We'd need allies, resources, and more than a little luck to challenge the Conclave head-on. "Zephyr," I said, breaking the silence. "Keep digging." "We need more intel." "On it, Captain," he replied, already returning to his console. Halcyon leaned back, a thoughtful look on his face. "We should reach out to the old networks, see who else might be sympathetic to our cause." It was a good idea and one that could turn the tide in our favor, but it was a long shot and we all knew it. "Do it," I said, nodding. "And let's hope they haven't all forgotten what it means to fight for something bigger than themselves." As we flew into the unknown, the reality of our situation was clear. We were rebels, outlaws, and fugitives in a universe that seemed hell-bent on grinding us to dust. But we were also human, and as long as we drew breath, we had a chance to turn the tide. Because in the end, the Conclave might have the numbers, but we had something more powerful: hope. The universe has a funny way of reminding you that things can always get worse. Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, you realize it's actually a trapdoor with a sign that says, "Welcome to hell, population. You." This particular trapdoor opened when Captain Thalia Kirsch got herself captured in what should have been a routine operation. Routine, of course. in the sense that nothing ever goes to plan, and someone almost always ends up with a blaster burn or two. We'd gone in to sabotage another conclave facility, and instead, they grabbed our fearless leader like she was the last donut at a stakeout. Back on Helios, the mood was somewhere between a funeral procession and a particularly depressing episode of interstellar reality TV. Everyone was moping around like they'd lost a limb, which, considering Thalia was our brains, was pretty much accurate. Zephyr, ever the optimist, or maybe just insane, was glued to his console, fingers moving like some caffeinated spider having a seizure. "I've got it," he muttered. "Got what?" Sarge grunted, looking like he'd just bitten into something sour, though that was his usual expression. Zephyr didn't look up. "The Conclave's got Thalia in the big house." And by big house, I mean the kind with lasers and probably a jacuzzi for their officers. Perfect place for a show trial. Halcyon raised an eyebrow. Show trial? They really going to lay it on that thick? Zephyr finally tore his eyes away from the screen, flashing a grin that was all teeth and no sanity. "Oh, they're pulling out all the stops. It's like they want a galactic audience." Jenny, cradling her still tender shoulder, snorted. "What are they going to do, broadcast it live? The Conclave's version of a soap opera, probably," Zephyr said, "and we're going to crash it." Sarge crossed his arms, his skepticism as thick as his neck muscles. "You got a plan, smart guy." "Isn't it obvious?" Zephyr replied, his grin only widening. "Stage a jailbreak. Get the lady out, make the Conclave look like the clowns they are." Halcyon rubbed his chin, considering. "And you think you can pull this off?" "With help," Zephyr admitted. "But yeah, I've hacked into their security feeds before. We can do it again, we just need to think bigger." "Great," Jenny muttered. "Because bigger plans have always worked out so well for us." We all knew she was right. The best laid plans in our line of work had a tendency to blow up in our faces, sometimes literally. But if we didn't do something soon, Thalia was going to be the star of a very grim production. "All right," Halcyon said, taking charge as Thalia would have. "Let's get to work. Zephyr, you're on hacking duty. Jenny, Sarge, gather intel on the prison guard shifts. We need to know when they're most distracted. Like during their lunch break or when they're watching reruns of Galactic Gladiators." Sarge grunted, which I took as agreement, and Jenny just sighed, the universal sign of someone who's in over their head but too stubborn to back out. We split up to work, the air buzzing with a grim determination and the occasional waft of burnt coffee, the unfortunate scent of nerves and malfunctioning equipment. Time passed in a blur of preparation and frayed tempers. Zephyr barely slept, fueled by a diet of synthetic caffeine and pure adrenaline. It was like watching a hamster on a wheel if that hamster had a doctorate in chaos theory. Finally, we gathered in the control room, the smell of burnt coffee stronger than ever. Zephyr took center stage, or rather, center console, ready to lay it all out. "All right, listen up," he began, trying for confidence and landing somewhere between eager and deranged. "I've got a way in. They've got a blind spot in their security, a vent system no one would think twice about. We slip in, grab Thalia, and slip out. Easy as pie." "Pie isn't easy," Jenny muttered. "Have you ever tried making a crust?" Zephyr ignored her. "I'll handle the security." "Halcyon, you'll distract the guards." "With what?" "My charm and a deck of cards." "If you have to," Zephyr replied. "Sarge, you're on lookout. Jenny, backup plan." "And what's the backup plan?" Jenny asked, though her tone implied she already knew she wouldn't like the answer. "Run like hell," Zephyr said deadpan. "Of course it is," she sighed. The plan was about as solid as a pile of sand, but it was all we had. And with Thalia's show trial looming, we were running out of time. As we suited up, I could feel the tension crackling in the air. It was the kind of tension that made you crack jokes just to hear someone laugh, because God knows there wasn't much else to be cheerful about. "Hey, Zephyr," Sarge said, as we checked our gear. "You sure this plan of yours won't get us all killed?" "Sure no," Zephyr replied. "But it's either this or we sit on our hands and let Thalia take the fall. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather not add accomplice to judicial murder to my resume." "Fair point," Sarge grunted. If there was one thing he hated more than the Conclave, it was a blot on his record. Our ship slid through the void, cloaked in stealth mode, heading for the Conclave facility. The closer we got, the more my stomach churned. Not quite fear, not quite excitement, something in between that made me wish I was anywhere but here. "Everyone ready?" Halcyon asked, voice calm but carrying the underlying resolve of someone who'd seen one too many battles. "As we'll ever be," Jenny replied, checking her weapon. The plan was simple, which, in our experience, meant it was doomed to fail spectacularly. But we didn't have the luxury of second-guessing. "We're approaching their airspace," Zephyr announced over comms. "On my mark, make for the vent." The hulking silhouette of the Conclave facility filled our view screens, a testament to bureaucratic overkill and someone's overinflated construction budget. Part fortress, part prison, all trouble. "Mark!" Zephyr shouted. We moved like shadows, slipping out of the ship and into the vent system. It was cramped, dark, and smelled like the wrong end of a week-old burrito, but it was our best shot. "Ventilation systems," Sarge grumbled. "Always with the ventilation systems." "Would you rather walk through the front door?" I replied, crawling behind him. "Not if I can avoid it," he said, voice echoing slightly in the metallic shaft. We navigated through the maze of vents, Zephyr guiding us with his console from the ship. The path twisted and turned, each junction a reminder that we were at the mercy of Zephyr's hacking skills. "All right, you're close," Zephyr's voice crackled in our ears. "Next opening should drop you right above the cell block." Jenny peered through the grating, eyes narrowing. "I see her. Thalia's in there, all right. And she's not alone." We could hear the guards' muffled conversation through the vent, a mix of boredom and bad jokes. Perfect. Bored guards are the best kind, less attention on us. "Okay, Halcyon," Zephyr said. "Do your thing, time to shine." Halcyon nodded, slipping out from the vent and into the open. He approached the guards with a confidence that made you believe he could talk anyone into anything, even joining a rebellion on a bad day. "Good evening, gentlemen," Halcyon said, flashing his trademark smile. "I hear there's a poker game going on in the rec room. Thought you might be interested." One of the guards, a beefy brute with a face like a bulldog that had chewed a wasp, glanced at his partner. "Poker game. Seriously, high stakes," Halcyon continued smoothly. "And I heard the winner gets more than just bragging rights." The guards exchanged looks. It was the kind of look that said they were weighing the risk of abandoning their post against the lure of a card game and whatever benefits came with it. "All right," said the bulldog-faced one finally. "But if I come back and find out you're pulling something, I'll make sure you regret it." "Wouldn't dream of it," Halcyon replied with a wink. As the guards shuffled away, Halcyon motioned us forward. We dropped from the vent, landing soft as a whisper. Thalia was behind an energy shield, looking more annoyed than terrified, which I took as a good sign. "Well, if it isn't my rescuers," she drawled, managing to sound both amused and exasperated. "Took you long enough." Zephyr fiddled with the control panel, sweating bullets as he tried to disable the shield. "They really need to update their security," he muttered. "These codes are ancient." "Tell them that later," Thalia replied. "Preferably after we're out of here." The shield shimmered and vanished, and Thalia stepped out, rubbing her wrists as if shaking off the last vestiges of captivity. "You guys sure know how to make a girl feel special," she said. "Don't get too comfortable," I told her. "We still have to get out." "Right," she nodded, slipping into her usual role without missing a beat. "Let's move." We retraced our steps, moving quickly through the ductwork, the sound of distant alarms hinting that the guards had caught on to the game after all. "Zephyr, we're on our way out," Halcyon said over comms. "How's it looking topside?" The line crackled with static, then Zephyr's voice came through. "Hurry up. They've noticed something's off and they're starting to lock down the exits." We scrambled through the vents, adrenaline pushing us faster. The facility was waking up, the mechanical hum of security systems coming to life all around us. "We need to move," Jenny shouted, urgency in her voice. We reached the ship just as the first security droids appeared, their sleek forms emerging from hidden alcoves like predatory birds of prey. Zephyr had the engines roaring before the hatch even sealed, and we shot out of the hangar bay like a bat out of hell. "Everyone in one piece?" I asked, once we were clear. "More or less," Thalia replied, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. "I owe you guys one. You can pay us back once we're safe," Sarge said, finally relaxing into his seat. Zephyr glanced up from his console, eyes gleaming with the thrill of surviving one more impossibility. "Well, that was fun. We should do it again sometime." "How about never?" Jenny suggested, her tone dry as a desert planet. We flew through the vast emptiness of space, the stars above us like silent witnesses to our escape. Thalia was back where she belonged, and as we left the Conclave's clutches behind, the weight of the world seemed just a little bit lighter, even if only for a moment. But the fight was far from over. We were just getting started, and the Conclave wouldn't forget this latest embarrassment. There would be hell to pay, and we'd be the ones collecting the tab. For now, though, we were together, and in this twisted, uncaring universe, that was a victory all its own. The ship hummed beneath us like a cat in a sunny patch, a brief moment of peace before the impending storm. We had Thalia back, but the looming shadow of the Conclave meant we couldn't bask in victory for long. "All right, genius," Thalia said, turning her attention to Zephyr, who was tweaking something on his console with the intensity of a surgeon performing a last-minute lobotomy. "What's our next move?" "Funny you should ask," Zephyr replied, not looking up. "I've got a little something cooked up in that overstuffed cranium of mine. We'll need to hit their FTL jammers with the superlaser. It's risky, bordering on suicidal, but it's our best shot." "Great," Sarge grunted. "When do we ever do things the easy way? I thought we were all about making the galaxy a more interesting place," Jenny quipped, rolling her eyes. Halcyon cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Before we dive headlong into another life-threatening escapade, let's consider the bigger picture. The Conclave won't just let us waltz in and out with Thalia. They'll be watching. Thalia smirked. "They'll be watching like hawks at a mouse convention, and they'll be as pissed as a cat in a rainstorm. But here's the thing," I said, feeling that familiar tingle of impending chaos. "If we take out their jammers, it opens up a gateway for us, and any other poor sods stuck under their thumb, to move freely again." Jenny leaned back, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "And with the superlaser, we can do a hell of a lot more than just open a door." "Exactly," Zephyr said, now fully in his element. "We hit them where it hurts, and suddenly we're not just annoying pests. They'll have to take us seriously," Thalia Halcyon said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd negotiated peace treaties and dodgy dinner parties alike. "What do you think?" Thalia paused, her eyes narrowing as she considered the plan. "I think," she said slowly, "we've got a fighting chance. But if we screw this up, we're toast. And not the good kind with butter." "Well, I've always preferred bagels anyway," Sarge muttered. "All right, people," Thalia announced, straightening with newfound resolve. "We're going to hit them hard and fast. Zephyr, you keep your magical fingers ready because we're going to need all the tech wizardry you can muster." "On it, boss," Zephyr said with a grin that was either confident or completely ludicrous. "We'll need to improvise," Thalia continued, glancing around at the ragtag crew. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone who's been crushed under the Conclave's heel." Halcyon nodded, his expression shifting to one of determination tempered by hard-earned wisdom. "To be clear, this is going to make all our previous headaches seem like gentle massages. Nothing like a little perspective," I said, feeling the weight of what we were about to attempt. "All right, let's make this happen." The plan was simple in the way all last-ditch efforts tend to be. We'd use the superlaser to take out the FTL jammers, opening a corridor wide enough for a fleet. Problem was, we only had one ship and a laser that was, at best, a glorified piece of farming equipment. "We're gonna need some serious luck here," Jenny said, strapping herself into her seat. "The kind you find in fairy tales and extremely dodgy card games. Guess it's a good thing I brought my lucky socks," Sarge replied, settling in with a grunt. The rest of us collectively decided not to ask why socks would make any difference at all. As Zephyr calibrated the superlaser, Thalia pulled out a tactical map, the holographic image flickering to life in the dim command room. "We've got this one shot. Once we fire, they'll know exactly where we are. Then we better make sure they don't have time to do anything about it," I replied. The ship drifted closer to the Conclave's central node, a behemoth of arrogance and misplaced authority. It glowed ominously against the darkness of space, a monument to the power they'd lorded over us all these years. "You know," Zephyr said, fingers dancing over the console, "if this works, maybe they'll give me a medal, or a slightly less uncomfortable seat. We'll make sure to etch your name on it," Jenny said dryly. "Cut the chatter," Thalia ordered, eyes never leaving the holographic map. "This is it, folks. Let's make some noise." Zephyr locked in the coordinates, his focus laser sharp. "Ready to fire on your mark, boss." Thalia hesitated just a fraction, the weight of what we were about to do settling over her. Then she nodded, her voice carried by resolve. "Mark." The superlaser charged, the ship vibrating with the power of a small sun. A beam of concentrated energy lanced out, striking the Conclave's FTL jammer with surgical precision. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the structures buckled, the explosion blooming in a silent display of fiery destruction. "Direct hit," Zephyr exclaimed, fist pumping the air. Like a hot knife through butter, the entire crew exhaled, our tension momentarily released. But we weren't out of the woods yet. "Their systems are going haywire," Zephyr reported, scanning the data flooding his screens. "It's now or never. Full burn." Thalia ordered, her voice cutting through the fading adrenaline. "Get us out of here." Engines roared to life, propelling us away from the chaos we'd left behind. Alarms blared across the Conclave's network, the hive waking to find its heart exposed. "We've got incoming," Jenny warned, watching as enemy ships moved to intercept. "Time to see if we can outrun them," Sarge said, his voice a mix of anticipation and grim acceptance. Zephyr pushed the ship to its limits, the vessel shuddering as it strained against the boundaries of physics and good sense. Stars streaked past us, the universe bending around our flight. "Hang on, everyone," Zephyr called out, his hands a blur on the controls. The Conclave's ships pursued us, determined not to let their prey escape. Our homebrewed stealth upgrades were good, but they weren't perfect. If they caught us, it'd be game over. "Evasive maneuvers," Thalia ordered, gripping the arm of her chair. "Keep them guessing." Zephyr twisted the ship through space, weaving between gravimetric eddies and asteroid fields. Each maneuver brought us closer to safety, but the Conclave wasn't giving up easily. "They're gaining," Halcyon noted, eyes locked on the readouts. "We need something more." Zephyr shot back. "I'm already doing things with this ship that defy engineering and at least 3 laws of nature." "Then defy a 4th, Thalia replied, her faith in Zephyr's skills unwavering. With nothing left to lose, Zephyr flicked switches and twisted dials, pushing the ship into an improvised warp jump. Space blurred, the stars merging into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. "Hold on," Zephyr yelled. The ship rattled, the hull groaning under the pressure. We emerged into calm, the silence of the void a stark contrast to the chaos behind us. The Conclave's ships, momentarily confused by our sudden disappearance, faded into the distance. "We did it," Sarge said, disbelief mingling with triumph. "We actually did it." Thalia allowed a small smile to grace her lips, the tension in her shoulders easing. "This is only the beginning," she warned, though her voice held a note of hope. "They'll come after us, but now we've shown the galaxy what we can do. What humanity can do, so what's next?" Jenny asked, her expression a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. "We regroup," Thalia replied, her gaze turning to the stars. "And then we fight back with everything we've got." There was a moment of silence, the enormity of what lay ahead settling over us. But for the first time in what felt like forever, it didn't feel like an impossible wait. It felt like a challenge we were ready to meet head-on. "Let's get to work," Zephyr said, already reviewing the data from our escape. "Because something tells me we're going to need all the tricks we can muster." "Tricks?" I asked with a smirk. I thought you were all about magic. Both, Zephyr replied with a grin, his eyes alight with the promise of mischief and mayhem. Together, we set course for the unknown, ready to make the Conclave wish they'd never underestimated the tenacity of a few stubborn humans. After all, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about showing the universe that we weren't going anywhere. And with the crew by my side, I couldn't help but feel a spark of optimism, buried beneath layers of cynicism and sarcasm. Here's to the next stupid, reckless adventure, Halcyon toasted, raising an imaginary glass. To us, Thalia agreed, her gaze steady as she looked around at the assembled crew. And to whatever comes next, we were outlaws, rebels, and the galaxy's most unlikely heroes. But damn it, we were alive and kicking, ready to take on whatever the universe could throw our way, one sarcastic comment at a time. The damn conclave was on us quicker than a debt collector on payday. The ship's alarms screamed their discontent, a chorus of impending doom, as the enemy fleet closed in. We'd pissed them off something fierce with our little superlaser stunt, and now they were coming for us like we'd just insulted their mothers. Zephyr, give me a status update or I swear I'll put you in a corner with a dunce cap, Thalia barked, her eyes glued to the chaotic mess of readouts blinking angrily on the console. Zephyr, flipping switches like he was playing the galaxy's most intense whack-a-mole, didn't even look up. We've got a fight on our hands, Captain. They're throwing everything they've got at us, fighters, frigates, and what looks suspiciously like a very angry toaster. Great, I muttered, glancing out the viewport at the swarming mass of ships. Last thing I needed today was a domestic appliance with an attitude. Get over it, Captain, Jenny chimed in, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she calibrated the ship's defense systems. Stereotypical household rebellion seems to be the least of our worries. Sarge, never one to be outdone in the cynicism department, grunted from his seat. First we get a superlaser, and now we've got an army of flying toasters. What's next? A blender with a death wish. Focus, people, Thalia interrupted, her voice a razor-sharp reminder of the task at hand. Zephyr, plot us a course out of this hellhole. Halcyon, keep those shields up. We're not going down without a fight. Halcyon nodded, his diplomatic facade discarded like an expired peace treaty. Just once, I'd like to negotiate my way out of a firefight. But I suppose this'll have to do. The ship shuddered as enemy fire raked across the shields, the impact reverberating through the deck. My teeth rattled in my skull, a percussive reminder that we were one wrong move away from becoming space debris. Evasive maneuvers, Thalia ordered, her voice steady, though the tension in her shoulders belied her calm demeanor. Zephyr twisted the ship through the oncoming barrage, the controls a blur under his deft hands. Easier said than done, boss. These guys aren't playing fair. No kidding, Jenny said, her fingers flying as she diverted power to the aft shields. It's like they didn't get the memo about chivalry in space combat. Guess we'll have to remind them, Thalia replied, her smile grim. Zephyr, on my mark, take us through that asteroid field. What asteroid field? I asked, just as a cluster of space rocks loomed into view, jagged and treacherous. That asteroid field, Thalia said with a nod. Of course, because why make it easy when we can make it suicidal? I quipped, bracing myself as Zephyr executed a gut-wrenching dive into the rocky chaos. The Conclave's ships hesitated, their pilots clearly not keen on following us into a natural obstacle course of death and dismemberment. It bought us a precious few seconds, but not much more. Okay, we've got a bit of breathing room, Halcyon said, scanning the rapidly shifting tactical display. But it won't last. They'll circle back. Then we need to hit them where it hurts, Thalia declared, her eyes sparking with defiance. Zephyr, how's that superlaser looking? Charging up, but it's not exactly ready for another round of fireworks, Zephyr admitted. I mean, it's a miracle it didn't fry itself the first time. Then consider this a miracle on repeat, Thalia said, her voice firm. We'll draw them in, and when they're close enough, we'll give them a taste of their own medicine. Hope you like your medicine with a side of fiery explosion, Sarge added, checking over his weapons with a practiced eye. As we circled through the asteroid field, the Conclave's ships regrouped, their pilots steeling themselves for another assault. They advanced like a swarm of angry hornets, each vessel brimming with lethal intent. "Here they come," Jenny warned, her eyes narrowing as she adjusted the targeting systems. "Let's hope they brought their own marshmallows," I said, a dark grin spreading across my face. We're about to light a fire. The first wave of enemy ships surged forward, their weapons blazing. We dodged, ducked, and weaved through the chaos, the ship an extension of Zepha's will as he danced it through the maelstrom. But the Conclave wasn't giving up. They pressed harder, determined to swat us down. "Zepha now," Thalia shouted, timing her command with the precision of a master conductor. The superlaser roared to life, its energy beam slicing through the void with ruthless efficiency. The FTL jammers stood no chance, their destruction a magnificent display of light and sound that shook the very fabric of space. "Direct hit," Zepha shouted, his voice a mix of triumph and disbelief. For a moment, the battlefield was silent, the Conclave's forces stunned by the sheer audacity of our attack. Then chaos erupted as their ranks broke, ships scattering in disarray. "We did it," Thalia said, a fierce pride in her voice. "The jammers are down, but we're not done yet," Halcyon cautioned, pointing to the remaining enemy ships regrouping for a counterattack. "They're not going to take this lying down." "Then we hit them again," Thalia replied, her resolve unshakable. "Jenny, Sarge, keep those guns hot." "Zepha, get us in position." As the Conclave's forces rallied, we struck with everything we had. No longer bound by the jammers, our ship danced through their ranks, a phantom of vengeance, while the superlaser fired in devastating bursts. "Looks like they're finally taking us seriously," Jenny observed, a satisfied gleam in her eyes as she unleashed another volley of laser fire. "About time," I replied, my own grin matching hers. "Maybe now they'll think twice before messing with humans, or not think at all," Sarge said, as another enemy ship disintegrated under our assault. In fairness, they never struck me as the brightest bulbs in the cosmic chandelier. The Conclave's fleet wavered, their confidence shaken by our relentless assault. They'd underestimated us, and now they were paying the price. "Keep up the pressure," Thalia urged, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "We've got them on the run." With their formation broken and their jammers reduced to scrap, the Conclave's ships fell back, retreating from the field as we pursued, striking with the precision of a surgeon. "Is it me?" Zepha mused, deftly guiding the ship through the retreating enemy. "Or do these guys look a little less smug now?" "Smug doesn't suit them," Halcyon replied, his own voice laced with satisfaction. "Especially when they're running with their tails between their legs." We gave chase, our ship a relentless predator, until the Conclave's forces scattered into the stars, their once dominant fleet reduced to nothing more than a memory. "Victory is ours," Thalia announced, her voice carrying the weight of hard-fought triumph. "Victory?" I echoed, leaning back in my seat with a mix of exhaustion and pride. I prefer to call it an educational experience. For them. With the Conclave's hold broken, the galaxy was open to us once more. We'd won the day, but the war was far from over. There were still battles to be fought, alliances to forge, and a whole lot of trouble to cause. But for now, we would savor our victory, knowing that our defiance had sparked a fire that would spread through the stars, igniting hope in those who had long given up. "Here's to pissing off the Conclave," Sarge toasted, raising an imaginary drink. "And to our next reckless adventure," Jenny added, a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "To us," Thalia agreed, her gaze sweeping over the crew. "The galaxy's most wanted." As we set course for the unknown, I couldn't help but feel a surge of anticipation. The universe was vast and filled with possibilities, and we were ready to take whatever it threw our way. "Time to make some noise," Thalia said, her voice firm with determination. "Music to my ears," Zepha quipped, his hands already dancing across the controls. Together, we launched into the stars, the promise of new horizons beckoning us forward. We were outlaws, rebels, and the galaxy's most unlikely heroes. But one thing was certain, we were far from finished. The universe had better brace itself, because we were ready to make a mark that wouldn't be forgotten. The ship hummed with the kind of victorious energy you'd expect after winning a fight against overwhelming odds. Or maybe that was just the leftover adrenaline making my ears buzz. Either way, we were alive, and the conclave was off licking its wounds somewhere in a distant sector. You'd think they'd have better hobbies than pestering humans, but here we are. Thalia was standing in the center of the control room, looking as close to pleased as a seasoned captain could after what we just pulled off. The air still smelled like burnt coffee, though it was possibly due to nerves, or the fact that Zephyr had once again used the coffee maker to test his homemade explosives. Either way, the control room had a unique aroma that screamed home in the most dysfunctional way possible. "So what now?" Sarge asked, leaning back in his chair with a theatrically exaggerated sigh. "We've pissed off the galaxy's version of space nuns and blown up half their toaster collection. What's next on our to-do list?" "Rebuilding," Thalia replied, her words carrying the weight of our recent struggles. "We've got a galaxy to piece back together. Earth and its colonies need to find their feet again." "Great," Zephyr said, still fiddling with the console like it owed him money. "Because if there's one thing I love more than dodging death rays, it's playing intergalactic handyman." Halcyon, ever the diplomat, leaned against the bulkhead with a weary smile. "We've given people hope, though. That's something. Maybe enough to get them off their asses and doing something productive for once." "Big ask," Sarge snorted. "Humans are notoriously good at sitting around moaning about problems rather than fixing them." "True," Jenny said, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the control panel. "But we've got momentum. We've shown them it's possible to stand up to the conclave. And live to tell the tale," I added, though my tone was as dry as Martian sand. "Assuming the conclave doesn't come knocking again with a bigger, angrier fleet next time." "Let them try," Thalia said. The fire in her eyes was enough to make even the most hardened of enemies think twice. "We've proven we can handle ourselves." Optimism. "Nice change of pace," Zephyr mused, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Does this mean we get to retire soon?" "Maybe open a pub somewhere nice and quiet." "Sure," I replied. "Right after the galaxy stops treating us like its personal stress ball." We shared a laugh, a sound that was more relief than mirth. The truth was, the galaxy was a mess, but it was our mess, and that's the way we liked it. Or at least, the way we tolerated it, because we didn't have much choice. As we began to chart a course back to friendly territory, the ship's comms crackled to life with a flood of incoming messages. "Thanks," "Congratulations," and the odd threat from die-hard conclave supporters who just couldn't let go. "Looks like we're famous," Halcyon said, scrolling through the messages. "Or infamous, depending on your perspective. Fame's just another way of saying please assassinate me first," Sarge pointed out, ever the optimist. "Or," Jenny countered, "it means people might actually listen to us." "Now there's a terrifying thought," Zephyr said, half under his breath. It was true, though. For better or worse, our little band of rebels was now a symbol. A sign that humanity wasn't just going to roll over and let the conclave dictate all the rules. It was about time someone reminded the universe that we were more than just an inconvenience to be managed. The ship's alarms gave a half-hearted beep, a reminder of the damage we'd sustained. It'd take some time to patch things up, but we'd been through worse. A few scrapes and bruises were nothing new for us. "Let's get the FTL drive back online," Thalia instructed. "We'll need to move fast once word gets out about what we've done." "Already on it," Zephyr replied, hands moving over the controls with the confidence of someone who'd intimate knowledge of how to coax life back into a dying machine. "Won't be long now." "Good," Thalia said, glancing around at her crew. Her family. "We've got work to do." As we worked, I found myself thinking back on the journey that had brought us here. The fights we'd won, the losses we'd suffered, and the moments of doubt that had nearly broken us. But through it all, we'd stuck together. Because when the universe is out to get you, there's no one you'd rather have at your back than the people who've been through the fire with you. "Hey, Captain," Sarge said, breaking my reverie. "You think they'll remember this day?" I considered it, the weight of history settling on my shoulders. "Depends. People remember what they want to remember. The important thing is we remember, that we keep fighting for what's right." "Cheers to that," Jenny said, lifting an imaginary glass in salute. It wasn't quite a toast, but it was enough. The ship lurched slightly as the FTL drive hummed to life, ready to catapult us back into the unknown. Homeward bound, or at least as close to home as we could get in this vast, ever-changing galaxy. "Coordinates set," Zephyr announced, leaning back with a satisfied grin. Next stop, a new chapter. And with that, the ship surged forward, leaving behind the wreckage of what had been and heading toward the promise of what could be. The journey back was filled with the kind of quiet reflection that comes after engaging in a near-suicidal mission and surviving. Each of us processing the events in our own way, the relief of victory tempered by the knowledge of the road ahead. "Think they'll throw us a parade?" Halcyon asked, eyes half-closed as if he could already see the streamers and hear the applause. "Doubt it," Sarge said, adjusting his cap. "More likely they'll send us a bill for all the damage." "Well, if they do," Jenny interjected, "we'll just send it back. Address it to the conclave of pious and probably annoying vegetables. Postage due." The laughter that followed was genuine, even if it was at our own expense. Because that's all part of the human condition, isn't it? Finding humor in the darkest places, a light in the blackest voids. Once we docked at Helios, the mood shifted, a palpable tension in the air as we stepped back into the familiar surroundings. Faces greeted us with a mixture of awe and disbelief, as if we were some mythical creatures returned from legend. "Heroes, they're calling us," Thalia muttered as we walked through the station, the weight of expectation settling heavily on her shoulders. "Dangerous word, that," I replied. "Heroes tend to have short lifespans in our line of work, but longer memories," Halcyon added, ever the diplomat. "Speaking of memories," Zephyr said, gesturing toward a group of reporters clamoring for our attention. "Looks like we've got some storytelling to do." Thalia sighed, the kind of resigned acceptance you'd expect from someone who knew this was coming but still hoped it wouldn't. "All right, let's go tell our tale. And try not to embellish too much. No promises," Zephyr grinned, ever the rogue. We faced the crowd, each of us playing our part in the narrative that would undoubtedly grow with each retelling. But beneath the smiles and the carefully crafted words was the understanding that this was far from over. We'd won a battle, but there was an entire war yet to be fought. One we'd have to tackle with every ounce of cunning, bravery, and stubbornness we could muster. As the day wore on and the crowds began to disperse, we found ourselves in a quiet corner of the station, finally able to breathe without a dozen microphones being shoved in our faces. Thalia looked around at us, her gaze steady and full of unspoken promises. "We've got work to do. But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate what we've accomplished." "To victory," Sarge toasted, raising an actual glass this time. "And to the chaos we've unleashed," Zephyr added, his grin as irrepressible as ever. "To us," Halcyon said, his voice a quiet testament to all we'd endured. And as we sat there, surrounded by the remnants of a battle hard won, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Because for all the challenges that lay ahead, we had each other. And that, as they say, was worth fighting for. The galaxy was vast and full of threats, but it was also full of possibilities. And with the FTL ban lifted, the universe was ours to explore once more. To rebuild, to forge alliances, and to stand strong against whatever